أناجي الحق في ليل بهيم أصدق النجوى وأدعو الله من قلب سليم يطلب التقوى أناجي الحق في ليل بهيم أصدق النجوى وأدعو الله من قلب سليم يطلب التقوى.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Ahlan wa sahlan wa marhaban bikum, and welcome to another edition of Perspective. My name is Faizel Patel. The news of Oscar Pistorius shooting dead his model girlfriend Reeva Steenkamp stunned the world. The Oscar Pistorius murder trial lasted more than 4 months, seeing the testimony of 37 witnesses, and vies for the title of Celebrity Murder Trial of the Century. But what really did happen behind that toilet door on the 14th of February last year that changed the life of South Africa's favorite sportsman? Behind the door, the Oscar Pistorius and Reeva Steenkamp story by Eyewitness News journalists Mandy, Weiner and Barry Bateman, published by Penn Macmillan, explores the characters involved, relates courtroom interactions, and unpacks the forensic and circumstantial evidence. Mandy Weiner is an award-winning investigative journalist and author of the true crime bestseller Killing Camel, An Underworld Exposed, and the acclaimed memoir My Second Initiation, co-written with advocate Vusi Piccoli. She has been reporting on the crime courts and politics in South Africa for the past decade. Barry Bateman has been reporting in Pretoria for more than 10 years, for the last 4 of these as a Pretoria correspondent for Eyewitness News, for which he has won several awards. Barry was also the first journalist on the scene of the shooting. And it's my absolute pleasure to have Mandy Weiner in studio with me this evening. Unfortunately, Barry couldn't make it this evening. Mandy, welcome to Perspective.
Thank you very much for having me.
Okay, first let's start off with, besides being a South African hero and the trial being labeled the trial of the century, what initiated the writing of Behind the Door?
Well, I think that this story really has all of the ingredients. You know, it has the global superstar. It has the fact that he was the country's good thing on this global stage, and then this Icarus-like, Shakespearean-like fall from grace. The beautiful blonde girlfriend who was on the cusp of local stardom, and the fact that he shot her on Valentine's Day. So it has all of the ingredients of an astonishing story to tell. But having said that, though, you know, it's also such a great tragedy, and we felt as South Africans we were best placed to tell the story rather than have anyone foreign come in and tell it.
Mm-hmm. Now, speaking of the initiation of the story, there were many other things happening in South Africa at the moment. We know in Kandla was happening as well. But why this particular story?
What to write the book about.
Yes.
I think that, you know, Barry and I were well positioned to write the book. He was, as you said, the first journalist on the scene. I'd written stories about true crime before, and crime is yes, you know, the kind of the subject that I spend more time on than anything else really in the criminal justice system. Mm-hmm. So I think that was the reason that we chose to write a book about this, and the fact that it really was the subject of so much international media that we felt that you know, we should write a book about it.
Okay. Now, judgment was handed down on Friday, September 12th, which is included in the book with legal experts rendering analysis. I mean, it must have been a mad rush for you to get the book out on time.
The judgment came out on that Friday, and we went to print on the Monday.
Yes.
For us, it was important to get the book out very quickly because there was such interest, and that we felt that we needed to get it out as quickly as possible, and that's why we chose to do that after judgment and not wait for sentencing, because for us the story ends at judgment, and this is standard practice. Yes. Is for a book to be published after judgment. But that weekend was definitely a mad scramble. You know, I had legal experts on hold, ready to give comment, and because it was quite a complex judgment, there was so much criticism around it that you know, we felt it important to add in that expert opinion and that analysis.
Yes. Now, both of you have been criticized for breaking news in the book. Some claim that new information you unearthed, which was contained in news bulletins after the book's release, had been staged and managed for publicity. Obviously, Barry can't answer it, but maybe you can elaborate on that?
Yeah, look, we did some significant investigations into what happened on the phones, and there were two things there. The one was the allegation that Oscar's brother Carl had deleted information from Oscar's handset after the shooting. The other was that we managed to establish that Oscar made a phone call to an ex-girlfriend of his, Jenna Edkins, in the hours before the shooting, and the police missed that. So, that was our only investigation that we uncovered that information. And then when the book came out, we broke the story because there was so much expectation of us about what was going to be new in this book. What is the point of reading a book if all the information is out there already? So we had to provide something new. Having said that, though, as soon as we established this information while the trial was still underway, we immediately gave it to the prosecuting team. So literally within an hour of finding it out, we gave it to the prosecuting team and said to them that we've uncovered this information. They were perfectly able to reopen their case and to introduce it as evidence. But ultimately the judge didn't even really look at the forensic evidence or the evidence of the phones. So who's to say that it would have made any difference? I mean, we spoke to both the sources in the prosecuting and the defense, teams, and they both said that this isn't the smoking gun that the public is looking for. So who knows what weight it would have carried.
Just on the part where you said that you gave the evidence to the prosecuting team. I interviewed Gia a couple of weeks ago when she mentions that it's not viable to become part of the story, or you don't become the story. Do you feel that by you giving the information to the prosecuting team that you maybe delved on that becoming part of the whole story?
Well, no, I think we were obligated to give, there was an expectation of us. We would have been criticised if we hadn't. And the information the defence already knew about it because it was Oscar's phone call. So there was no point in us giving them their own information. And in fact, when we spoke to a member of the defence team, they said that they always knew about this phone call and that they'd consulted with this ex-girlfriend and that she was prepared to testify. So we absolutely weren't, showing our bias in any way by giving it to the prosecuting team. In fact, people that have read this book, and our intention was to make it as objective and balanced as possible. And that is what people say, is that it definitely has come across as being objective and balanced, because we can't give an opinion. We can't, and we don't in the book give an opinion about what happened and whether we think Oscar intentionally shot Reeva or not, because we can't, write through a jaundiced view and expect the public not to be influenced.
Of course. Now, obviously, you and Barry covered the trial extensively, reporting every day. Barry was the first journalist on the scene of the shooting. What was the media contingency like at the court every day for the duration of the trial and bail application? So
Barry was in court for the entire trial. I wasn't there for the most of the trial because I had a baby a week before the trial actually started. So I was watching a lot of it on TV, but I was there for judgment and sentencing. And I was there for the whole bail application as well, which was just astonishing. We have never experienced this kind of media interest in a story before, because we had foreign correspondents jetting in. We just in the courtroom there was literally like a refugee camp almost, because there was nowhere to sit. There were cables everywhere. Everyone was just squatting in any corner that they could find. And the interest from overseas. Within 2-3 minutes of the story breaking, I had CNN and Sky and BBC all on the phone to me. I think the level of media interest in this was just unprecedented. We didn't realise how famous Oscar Pistorius was in the UK and the US. Okay.
Now, I think you did mention it earlier that the book was launched before sentencing. You were saying that because you felt the story was, that's where it ended. Maybe you can elaborate a little bit further on that?
Yeah, so we looked at precedent and what other people had done. So, for example, the story about the Griquastad murder, there's a few others where books have been published after the judgment, because usually it takes quite a long time for sentencing, and also for us, the court had made a decision, and the court had passed the judgment. And this thing of, it's going on appeal, we know that it's still got a long way to run, and we had to make a decision about when to actually put it out. But there will be revised editions after the appeal process is finalised, and there were always going to be subsequent revisions of the book, because we knew that this was still got a long journey to run.
Of course. Now, several other books have been published, the recent one being from June Steenkamp. What makes Behind the Door different from the others that's out on the market at the moment?
Well, because of Barry and my position and unique position in covering the story, you know, we feel that Behind the Door is the definitive book on the trial. You know, we are able to go behind the scenes and give insight into the decision-making processes of both legal teams and you know, what was going on in the corridors of justice. We've got some exclusive interviews with people that I've done, for example, with Magistrate Desmond Nair, with Samantha Cravenstein, who was Reeva Steenkamp's best friend, with you know, the Samantha Taylor, you know, with a few other people, just to give that exclusive aspect to it. And then, of course, we've got our own investigations that we've done around two issues. The one is the blood in the toilet bowl, and the other one is the phones.
Now, you mentioned your interview with Desmond Nair, who was the bail magistrate, and also you said Samantha Taylor. Was it difficult securing interviews with those people that were directly involved with the case? Yeah,
it was incredibly difficult to get people to speak about this case because, you know, the issue was that people didn't want to speak because they were going to be state witnesses or they were somehow involved. In some cases, people wanted money and we refused to pay people for interviews. In other instances, they'd signed exclusivity deals or they had just chosen to not get involved at all. So some of the interviews we did on the basis that they wouldn't be released until after the trial was concluded. You know, that was the agreement. And other people just, you know, refused to participate. So when we first decided to actually do the book, Barry and I sent letters to the Pistorius family, the Steenkamp family, and the Myers family, telling them that we were doing this book and asking them for their cooperation. And we said to them, please, can we speak to you? Please, can you be involved in this process to make it as objective and balanced as possible? And some of them chose to cooperate, and some of them chose not to. But it was important for us to make sure that everyone had the opportunity to contribute.
Okay. You tune to Perspective. This evening we're speaking to Mandy Weiner. Unfortunately, Barry Bateman couldn't be here, but we're getting some insight into a book called Behind the Door, which is a book written by Barry Bateman and Mandy Weiner. We're going to go for a break. After the break, we will continue speaking to Mandy Weiner. Stay tuned to Perspective.
أصدق النجوى وأدعو الله من قلب سليم يطلب التقوى إلهي صرت في ظرف عصيب فاكشف البلوى فيا ربي.
Welcome back to Perspective. This evening we're speaking to Mandy Weiner. Unfortunately, Barry Bateman couldn't be here, and they've published a book called Behind the Door. An absolutely brilliant book. I'm currently reading it at the moment, and it gives an insight into the Oscar Pistorius story. Now, Mandy, let us continue. The world has been following the story from day one, from the day of the shooting. Since Barry was there, the tweet went out by a bail journalist, the bail application, the trial, the judgment, the sentencing. What will readers find out that they didn't know before in this particular book? And I want to elaborate on an article that was written by Gia Nicolaides for Cosmopolitan magazine. What she says is what you didn't see in the Oscar trial.
Yes.
So although it was televised, it was on radio, what didn't the listeners and the viewers see in the courtroom that's in this book?
So for us it was important not to just take the court transcript and slap it between two covers. And the fact that this was the first trial that was ever broadcast live in South Africa, we knew that we would have to go beyond the 9:30 to 3 o'clock when the cameras were rolling. So there's a lot of colour of the interaction. So what happened when the cameras weren't rolling, for example, the relationship between Oscar Pistorius and his extensive family, his relationship with the lawyers, what was being said in the public benches, but also about what was going on in the legal teams. I mean, there's one chapter that is dedicated to the strategy of the legal teams and the politics going on within particularly the defence legal team. You know, that was important. But then also, you know, we do exclusive interviews with people, but we also tell the story as a narrative. And that's particularly in the first few chapters where we take the reader through what went down in the hours around the shooting, which you would have heard through court testimony, but that court testimony can be quite dull and quite bland, and you know, we've made it into this narrative that flows, that you can follow far better.
I mean, you said that there's a lot of information here, and there is, on the whole legal aspect of the trial. Were the defense and prosecution teams forthcoming with information in this particular book?
We had very good sources that were close to both teams, that were able to give us insight. Obviously they aren't, advocates aren't allowed to speak about the trial while it's ongoing, but we were able to glean some information that is included in the book that really will give the reader insight into what was going on really in those legal teams, because that's really what you want to know is what you weren't allowed to know.
Course. Now, obviously, one of the other major factors in this whole saga was the day that Eyewitness News broke the story about Hilton Botha, that he had several charges against him for shooting, I think, a taxi and people that were sitting in a taxi. This didn't play an impact on the bail application in that particular case. Can you comment on why it didn't, obviously, Desmond Naya didn't take it into account?
Yeah, well, obviously this was the story that was broken by Alex Ellisy, my colleague, and that was while the bail application was going on, about the fact that Hilton Botha was facing his own charges against him. I vividly remember Gerrie Nel coming to court that day and raising it, saying that he had just found out to Magistrate Naya. And in the interview I did with Magistrate Naya, I did ask him about that and why more wasn't made of it, and he kind of danced around the issue. He wouldn't quite say whether or not he knew and whether or not this was an issue that he needed to pick up on. But he didn't mention it in the trial, in the bail application. He felt that it wasn't relevant. But of course, as a result of that, Captain Mike van Aert took over as the investigating officer, and he carried the trial through to the end. Okay.
Now, you were mentioning that when the whole shooting took place, you've just got a baby. Journalists as myself and yourself, it knows no time. How did you juggle, the whole aspect of writing the book, going to court, looking after a little baby, probably spending time with your husband as well? Must have been murder.
It was incredibly difficult. So I had a little boy a week before the trial started. Yes. And remember, at that stage, we thought the trial was still going to be 3 or 4 weeks long. We didn't know it would be, nearly 6 months. So I thought I was going to have to get a book finished in 1 month. But it was very difficult, because you don't sleep a lot when you have a new baby. And he didn't sleep a lot. So it was very challenging. But I think it worked to our benefit that Barry was in court and I was outside, and having a kind of a wider perspective and a more holistic view on the story. And then, of course, I had great help. I've got a fantastic husband and an excellent nanny. But never again will I try and write a book that is, it's 600 pages long.
600 pages long,
yes. So never again am I going to try and do that with a newborn baby.
Now, another question obviously that comes to mind is, obviously, besides the Oscar trial, there was a lot of other news stories that was going on in the country at the time, whatever they may be. How did this affect your duties as a journalist at EWN as opposed to writing the book? Well,
I was on maternity leave, so it didn't affect me too badly. But, Barry can tell you that, between the bail application and the trial, we had, of course, the very sad news of former President Nelson Mandela passing away. And Barry spent a good month or two outside the hospital in Pretoria. So, it was incredibly difficult for him. And then, of course, we had the funeral and all of that, and there was massive media that arrived in the country. So, we had to kind of balance our time and to go from one big news story to the next. And, of course, we dedicated quite a bit of resources to the Oscar Pistorius trial, working with Carte Blanche as well on the 199 channel. So it took quite a bit of strain. There was big hours that went into
Absolutely. It. Okay, Barry was first on the scene. Obviously, he's not here this evening, but maybe he told you, or maybe you can elaborate, what was it like being the first journalist on the scene? I know he wasn't allowed to go in because the security was at the gate, but and then from there his tweets went out.
Yes.
And he also speaks about his Twitter following jumping from, I think, 17,000 to 121,000. But did he relate to you? What was it like being there?
Yeah, so Barry, of course, first got a phone call that morning from a police contact of his at a nearby policing precinct saying, "Are you at Oscar's house?" And he thought, well, what's going on? Is there? And the person said, no, Oscar's shot someone. So he immediately phoned the police spokesperson for the area and said, can you confirm this? Are you investigating, is the person shot dead or is the person shot wounded?
Yes.
And the police officer said, we're still investigating that.
Yes.
And then Barry had to first drop his daughter at school,
yes, I heard it,
and then only rushed through to Silver Lakes, where Oscar's house is, and he was the first journalist there, and he started doing live crossings after Bealt had broken the story, and the Bealt journalists arrived soon afterwards. And then within an hour, the internationals started arriving with their live satellite vans, and then the pathology van would have left, and Denise Beekers, the police spokesperson, came out and gave that press conference. Now I was watching it in the newsroom, where she said that she doesn't know where the story comes from, that it was an intruder, and that there'd been previous incidents of a domestic nature at Oscar Pistorius' house in the past. And that was when we really realized that there was more to the story, that maybe there was something more sinister, and the story really shifted.
Okay. Now, the first 2 chapters of the book are absolutely riveting. I mean, it hooked me totally and reads like a crime novel. What made you decide to begin the book in this particular way?
So for us, it was important to tell the narrative, tell the story. And what we've done is we've taken the court testimony and we've reconstructed it into this narrative, so that people, you would have heard the testimony of Michelle Berger or Estelle van der Merwe, and you would have heard all of these bits and pieces from the snips, and it wouldn't have really fitted into a big picture. You would have had pieces of the puzzle. So for us, we wanted to tell the story from beginning to end, so that you could follow it and you could get that flow, and you could understand what the neighbors heard and what they saw and what happened on the scene, and really get a good understanding of the crime scene and all of that. It was important for us to set that scene for the reader in the opening chapters.
Okay. We just got a few minutes left. Now that Oscar is in jail, we know he's been sentenced to 5 years. There's talk of an appeal as well. What can we expect next? And your last thoughts and comments, and where can the readers get this wonderful book?
Well, of course, the appeal process is underway now. The issue that the prosecution has with Judge Thokozile Masipa's judgment is that they believe that she misapplied the principles of dolus eventualis, and that she asked the wrong legal question. So she asked the legal question whether Oscar Pistorius could reasonably foreseen that his actions would have killed Reeva. They're saying she should have asked the question whether his actions, he could have reasonably foreseen that he would have killed someone. So they argued that that she asked the wrong legal question. And then, of course, it's up to the judges in Bloemfontein, at the Supreme Court of Appeal, to decide whether or not Masipa was right or not. Okay.
And where can our viewers get this book from?
Well, it's available at all bookstores. CNA, Bargain Books, Exclusive Books. It's available on Kindle, Amazon, Kalahari, anywhere. Basically, you can buy the book.
Just your last thoughts and comments to our viewers.
Well, I mean, look, this is an incredible story. It's I think that it really polarized the country, and people have been very emotionally invested. I think some people may have some Oscar fatigue, but I think once you hit December and you come down from the year that was, it's a good way to reflect on what we've been through as a nation, really, over the past years. We've all lived every moment of this trial.
Mandy, Weiner, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you in studio this evening.
Thank you very much.
And all the best with the book. Unfortunately, Barry couldn't be here, but I'm sure you will convey my regards to him as well.
Definitely. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Unfortunately, we've come to the end of another edition of Perspective. Absolutely brilliant book. I think you should go out and get it. Remember, you can interact with me. Send me a mail on Faizel at itvnetworks.tv. Drop me a tweet on at Faizy143, or you can even comment on my Facebook page, Faizel Patel. From myself, Faizel Patel, and the great team here at ITV, fi amanillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
أناجي الحق في ليل لهيم أصدق النجوى وأدعو الله من قلب سليم يطلب التقوى أناجي الحق في ليل لهيم أصدق النجوى وأدعو الله من قلب سليم يطلب التقوى إلهي صرت في ظرف عصيب فاكشف البلوى فيا ربي أنا عبد لرد الضيم لا يقوى أعني ربي في